Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel, and on today's video we're going to be talking about 10 things I wish I'd known before starting witchcraft. Now there's a lot of things out there that I wish I'd have known before starting witchcraft. These are just the top 10 things that I really wish that I'd have known. Some of them I've spent years, nearly a decade in some cases, trying to correct because I'd learnt it so integrally at the very start of my practice. It's really hard to unlearn things. It's much easier to learn things correctly the first time around than attempting to unlearn them and then relearn something else. So for any of you that are just starting your witchcraft journey, I really hope that this video helps you to not make the same mistakes that I did. If you have been practicing for a while though, let me know which of these mistakes you fell into, or do you have any others that you did that you really wish that you hadn't done? What did you wish that you'd learned before you started practicing witchcraft? Number one is that change is allowed. It seems like such a simplistic concept, but when I started practicing witchcraft, I truly believed that I had to choose the style of practice I wanted to do. I had to be a certain type of practitioner, and I had to stay like that forever. And it took me so long to break out of this idea. I was practicing something I wasn't interested in for so many years because I truly thought that once I chose the type of practice that I was going to do, I wasn't allowed to change it. So I've noticed in the last 5 to 10 years, there's so much emphasis on what type of witch you are, or how do you know what type of witch you're going to be. And I think a lot of people fall into the same mistake of putting themselves into a box and then never feeling as though they can leave it. A lot of these images and posts and blogs, they never have any information saying that you don't have to be a certain type of practitioner or you don't have to put yourself in this box. And so loads of beginners come into witchcraft and the first thing that they research is the different types of witches, and then they put themselves into a category and they never leave it. And I was definitely very prone to this. When I started my magical journey, I was an elemental practitioner. And so I spent probably 8 years as an elemental practitioner. Even though I really wanted to practice things outside of it, I was like, no, I can't because I'm an elemental witch. Everyone knows me as an elemental witch. I can't really do anything else. And so I got myself into this rut because I never thought I could change. And it's really important to remember that within witchcraft, within life in general, change isn't necessarily a bad thing, and you don't have to squish yourself into this little tiny box and then never feel as though you can leave it again. I found my practice was way more successful and way more fulfilling when I wasn't trying to make every single working I did an elemental working, because sometimes it just doesn't work. Sometimes it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't fit the style right. So if you are new, don't be afraid of your practice changing. As you develop as a person, as you develop your knowledge, your skills, your understanding, as you change from solitary to coven or back again, it's really important to give yourself the opportunity to adapt your practice, because one practice is not going to suit you for your entire life. For some people it might, but for a lot of people, change is important. And don't be afraid of it, because I put myself in this little box and I never felt as though I could leave. The second thing is, don't practice something if it makes you feel uncomfortable. I spent so many years practicing a style of magic that I didn't like and that made me feel really uncomfortable because I felt like it was the right thing to do. Everything that I was doing naturally was not written down in books. And so I started following the more ceremonial practice that was written in books, and a lot of it made me feel really uncomfortable, but I did it anyway. It's important to remember that not every style of magic is going to be comfortable for everyone, and not everyone is going to practice the same things. If you don't feel comfortable practicing something, whether that's blood magic, ceremonial magic, necromancy, whether it's working with spirits or ancestors, if that makes you feel uncomfortable, don't feel as though you need to pressure yourself into doing it. When it comes to magical practice, you're going to get much better results if you feel at peace and if you feel centered during your workings. If you're constantly worried about the outcome, if you're worried about what it is that you're doing, if you're feeling really uncomfortable and not safe in that environment, then don't practice it. And this also applies to everything in your normal life as well. If something is making you feel really uncomfortable, don't do it. Make sure that you are safe in the environments that you are putting yourself in, whether that is physically or simply emotionally and mentally. When it comes to witchcraft, the same applies. If you don't feel comfortable, take a step back and find another route, because there are lots of options out there. And that leads me nicely onto point number 3. There's more than one way to practice. When I started practicing in the 2000s, a lot of books had the same kind of rituals, the same kind of language, the same basis, the same practice. And so I felt very much as though I had to do what was written in books. It was the only way. But now, especially with so many books being published from all over the world, we can see that there's lots more ways of practicing than maybe we might have realised. If something doesn't resonate with you, try and find something that does. There's so many styles of magical practice, not everyone has to do the same thing. You can do doll magic, you can work with bags and pouches, you can work with bottles, with candles, with oils, you can work with spirits and ancestors, you can do purely energetic work, or you can do a lot of trance work, you can use sigils, or you can use divination tools. There's so many things out there that don't feel as though you have to practice the exact same way as someone else. And I feel a lot of people definitely fall into this, especially if they're beginners. They feel as though they have to mimic the way someone else practices in order to have a successful magical practice. But you 100% don't. My style of practice is very different from everyone else that I know, and everyone else that I know also has a really unique style of practice. So if you are just getting started, please don't try to copy exactly the kind of practice I do. Give it a try, see if it works for you, and if it doesn't, try something else. There are so many options out there, and it's definitely something I fell into a lot. I was determined that I was going to make certain styles of magic practice work for me because it had worked for someone else. But the reality is, everyone's different, and what I resonate with and what I practice might not work successfully for someone else if it's not something that they really connect to. And I think that's the main thing when it comes to magical practice, is if you don't feel as though something is going to work for you, if you don't feel as though it's right, it probably won't work for you because your mind is not in the right space for it. You're already doubting what it is that you're doing, so you're no longer focusing on the energy and the intention that you're putting into it. So if you are just getting started, try loads of different techniques. If you've never tried using sigils, give it a go. If you've never tried using candle magic, try it. It might work really well for you. If none of the very item-heavy practices work for you, maybe try working with spirits. Maybe try working simply with energy rather than items and see if that works best. I have met so many beginners over the years that say that witchcraft doesn't work for them because they're copying someone else's style and they don't really understand why they're doing it or what works for them. And so if you are finding it really difficult to start off with, try loads of different styles, different types of magical practice to see what works and what doesn't when it comes to your style of practice. Number 4 is that Wicca and witchcraft are different. Now, when I started practicing in the 2000s, every single book that was written was very, very Wicca based. And you still see it today. There's a lot of books that I've picked up even recently, even books that I picked up just a few weeks ago in Glastonbury that I flicked through, and even though they don't say that they're Wicca based, they have a lot of Wicca in them. And it's really, really common, and it makes it so easy for beginners to fall into the trap of having to follow the Wiccan religion if you do practice witchcraft. Now, Wicca is a relatively recent religion. It was created in the late 1930s, early 1940s by Gerald Gardner, and was then released to the public in early 1950s, and then it just spread all over the world and it became so unbelievably popular. Now, Wicca draws on a lot of pre-Wiccan practices. A lot of witchcraft practices are incorporated into Wicca, and so a lot of the followers of the Wiccan religion also practice witchcraft. But you don't have to be a follower of the Wiccan religion to practice witchcraft, because witchcraft is considerably older than what we now consider to be Wicca. And so if you are new and you aren't interested in the Wiccan religion, don't feel as though you can't practice witchcraft, because you definitely can. And witchcraft, because it is secular, it's non-religious, can actually be attached to other religions. There are lots of Christian witches out there, there are lots of pagan witches out there, there are lots of non-religious witches out there that still have successful magical practice. And I spent maybe 8 years following the Wiccan religion, even though I didn't resonate with it at all. And it took me so long to figure out that there was more out there, that Wicca and witchcraft, although they do go together really, really well, don't have to go together. And so for me, it was a really revolutionary moment where I was like, hang on a minute, I have even more success with my magical practice when I'm not following this religion and this tradition that I don't resonate with. And so for me, having that division works best. For some people, it works really well together, but it's worth trying both ways. If you are interested in Wicca, have a look into the history, have a look into the text and the writings of it and see if it works for you. But also don't feel as though you have to follow a religion you don't resonate with just to practice witchcraft, because you definitely don't. And magical practice is found all around the world. On almost every single continent around the world, there are people who've practiced magical traditions in one form or another that go under different names. And the majority of them have probably never heard of Wicca. So don't feel as though you have to be Wiccan in order to undertake magical practice. As I've mentioned, they do go well together, but you don't need to practice them together. Number 5 is that items aren't required. I know I say this a lot on the channel, and that's mainly because I fell into this one big style. I got so many items at the start of my magical practice, and it was only when I really looked into which ones I used and which ones I didn't that I started to realise that it was entirely unnecessary. Now, largely I bought items because the practice that I was undertaking was more ceremonial, it was often very heavily Wiccan influenced, and I also used a lot of offerings for the elementals. And so ultimately I ended up with a whole load of items that once I realised that style of practice wasn't for me, I just never used them ever again. I mean, obviously some of them I do use occasionally, but not like I was expecting to. And so if you are really new, if you're going to spend money on anything, I would recommend spending money on books rather than items, because especially when you're just getting started, your practice is going to change so drastically that you might buy a really expensive item and then within a few weeks you have progressed onto a different style of practice and you never use that item ever again. So if anything, if you do want items, make them yourself. If you want to try using wands, then go and make a wand yourself. If you want to try using chalices, then try using a wine glass or a champagne flute or something that you already have around or that's reasonably priced, that you can give it a go and see if it works for you. And then if you do decide you really like using it and you want something a little more specialized, a little more intricate, more beautiful, you can go and buy one or you can go and get one custom made, and then you know that you're actually going to use it. There's so many items that I have from the very start of my practice that I'm not going to get rid of because they're sentimental. They mean something to me about the progress of my journey, but I never use it, and so it's kind of a waste of me getting it in the first place, and I kind of regret doing that. If anything, I would have been much better off buying books versus buying the items that I never ended up using. Number 6 is trust your gut instinct. I have found that I pushed my gut instinct down for so many years. I had a style of practice before I actually started really studying witchcraft. I had been doing it for many years before I actively began learning and talking to other people and interacting with the witchcraft community. And I found that my practice before I started talking with the community and before I started learning officially was very different than what I saw being written about in books and being spoken about by people. And so I did the daft thing of completely pushing aside my original practice because I thought it was inaccurate and entirely replacing it with something else, even though my gut was screaming at me, no! And it's only been in maybe the last 5-ish years that I've really started listening to my gut instinct and going back to what I was doing before. I spent a long time really pushing aside my gut instinct in replacement for what I thought was correct. And it took me a while, but once I did realise, I discovered that my gut instinct was pretty accurate all along. And it's generally what you'll find in day-to-day life anyway, is that if your gut instinct is telling you something, it's really worth listening to it, even just a little bit. It's worth just giving it the time of day, because my practice has changed entirely now that I've gone back to listening to my gut instinct, listening to what I feel is right rather than what people are telling me is right. And so especially when it comes to magical practice, when it comes to correspondences and energy work and the type of spells and rituals that you do, it's really worth listening to that gut instinct and following it. If you don't feel as though something is right, take a break, take a pause, listen to that gut instinct, explore it, and then decide what it is that you want to do, because it has massively changed my magical practice now that I actually listen to my gut. Number 7 is to write stuff down. This is something I've mentioned several times in my Books of Shadows videos, and to this day, I still really regret it. Now, although I do have Books of Shadows going back to about 2008, There are so many years where I didn't write anything down, both before that Book of Shadows and also after, where I didn't consider it to be significant enough to warrant writing down. And now I am kicking myself because it was definitely significant and I definitely should have wrote it down, and I just didn't, and now I really regret it. Progress is something that you cannot see until you are looking back on where you came, and so it's really frustrating for me to not have any information about the first few years of my magical practice. I have nothing. And although now I have YouTube where I can document the things that I remember and the things that I do now, there's lots of practices, there's lots of rituals and spell work that I simply don't remember because I never wrote it down. Every live stream I get the same question: what was your first spell? And the answer is, I have no idea, because it was 16 years ago and I didn't consider it significant enough to write it down, which is something I really, really regret now. So if you are new, write down everything you can. It doesn't have to be in an expensive notepad, it doesn't have to be in a leather Book of Shadows. Just get a cheap as hell notepad and just start writing stuff down. If you want to do it online, just make sure that you back it up several times and keep track of what you're doing. Because in 5 years, in 10 years, you are so going to want to remember the things that you did, the things that you studied, your thought process. And if you don't write it down, you're not going to have it. And believe me, take it from someone who really regrets not writing it down. Please write it down. You will be so thankful that you did it in 10 years' time, because a lot of the little things you're going to forget. You know, that's just the way the mind works. There's a lot of stuff that you're going to forget that I think you're going to want to remember in the future. Next up is that not every working needs to be ceremonial. And oh boy, did I fall into this one big style. Everything I did for maybe like 6 years was 100% whole hog ceremony. And it was a lot. And I got to the point where I didn't really want to practice anymore because everything I did was taking like 5 days of prep work. I mean, like writing down the ritual, writing down the exact steps, setting out an exact time and place and planetary hours and actual hour and specific time of day, specific moon phase. We're talking about like ceremonial cleansing showers, cleansing the space, ritual clothing, ritual tools, circle casting, calling in the quarters. I'm talking the whole hog for a tarot reading. Like, not every working needs to be so unbelievably ceremonial. And there are so many books out there that really do emphasize the need for that. And that definitely works for some people. But if you're finding that you're doing it and you end up exhausted and you just don't care anymore by the time you get to the actual ritual, then it could be worth taking a step back and reevaluating what needs to be ceremony and what doesn't. Even if you enjoy ceremonial practice, not everything has to be ceremonial. I was doing ceremony for everything. I mean, like a rune reading would take me 5 days worth of prep work, and I could do it once a month because I had to line up the specific planetary hours, and it was getting to the point of stupidity. Like, it was getting really bad. And so if you do enjoy using ceremony and you enjoy using planetary hours and cleansing baths and ritual clothing, then go for it. Just make sure that you know why you're doing it. And not everything that you do needs to be so ceremonial. You know, like I could still go and do a full ceremony today and I would feel that it was useful as long as the working called for it. But I was falling into the rut of making everything I did ceremonial. I mean, like even the simplest of divination readings had like a month-long planning session for a 5-day-long ritual. Like it was bad. And especially if you are interested in ceremonial magic, you can definitely fall into this trap. And this kind of relays back to what I was saying earlier, where if you don't feel comfortable in a situation, if it just doesn't feel like it's working for you, don't be afraid to change it up. Even if you are a ceremonial practitioner, that doesn't mean you have to use ceremony in every single thing that you do. And actually, it can hinder your practice, especially if it's making you not want to do even the simplest of things, because it's going to take you like 5 days to set everything up. Now, the next one is a big one, and I try to emphasize it a lot when I do talk about books on this channel, and that is not all books are going to be good for you and for your magical practice. I have seen so many people give books scathing reviews for just like the smallest thing. If a book contains Wicca, you will see hundreds of really, really horrible reviews about it because the person who's reading it doesn't practice Wicca. But that doesn't mean that the book is inherently bad, it just means it's not good for you. And I think it's really important when it comes to book recommendations that you do the research on whether that book is going to be suitable for you and your style of magical practice. Make sure that you research the author. Make sure that you research the type of practice that they do. Have a look at the other works that that author has done. The internet is an amazing thing. 10, 15 years ago, it was a little bit more tricky to figure out what an author had done before. But now, with a few clicks, you can find all of the works that an author has written, and you can figure out a little bit more about them to see if that work is going to be suitable for you or not. When I started practicing, there weren't that many books available, especially readily available. And so every single book that I read was heavily ceremonial. It was also heavily Wicca influenced. And so I thought that every single one of these books was good and that it was good for me. But now that I have a ridiculous volume of books, you know how many books I have, I've realised that not every book is right for me. That doesn't mean that the book is inherently bad, it just means that for me, it's not good. And so if you are going to buy books, make sure that you do your research on whether that book is suitable or not. Have a look at online reviews, have a look at blog reviews, but then also remember to take those reviews with a pinch of salt, because they're based on the opinions of the person who's created that review, and they are going to have a different magical practice than you do. So don't follow every single step-by-step, word-for-word ritual or spell that you see in a book. Make sure that you take everything with a pinch of salt and then add in other works, other types of learning. Go to social media tentatively, go to YouTube, go to blogs, go to other books by other authors, go to people that you meet in person, go to events. Try to gain information from a lot of different sources, and then it's a case of using trial and error to figure out what works best for you. Books are not gospel, especially not within the witchcraft community, because there are so many witchcraft books on so many different topics. Because witchcraft is such a huge collection of magical practice, a book on ceremonial magic might not be suitable for you. Just like a book on the Wiccan religion might not be suitable for you either, but for someone else, it might be really, really good. So just make sure that you do your research and get your information from lots of different authors. I know I have a lot of works by the same author, but that's largely because I've already done that research. If you are just getting started, don't just buy an entire range of books by one person or one publishers. I've noticed there's some publishers out there that publish occult books that really sway one way or the other when it comes to the style of practice that they talk about. And if you want a well-rounded magical practice, it's a case of picking and choosing different things from different places to try to develop that underlying foundation that you can then build on. Next up is don't push away your natural abilities. It can be so tempting, especially when you are feeling really overwhelmed by it. If you are able to see spirits, if you are an empath, if you are naturally having precognitive dreams, these things can be exceptionally overwhelming. But if you are new, don't push them away. Instead, try learning to manage them. They sound almost the same, but I promise you they're definitely not. When I started practicing, I could see auras, I could see spirits, and I pushed it away so hard because it was so overwhelming. And now that I'm later on in my practice, I'm like, oh, why did I do that? Why did I do that when there's so many techniques that I could have used to just help keep it under control? So if you are struggling with empathy, if you are struggling with seeing and hearing spirits, if you are struggling with psychic dreams, I would say it's so tempting to push them away. But if you can learn to control and to manage, you're probably going to be quite grateful for that at a later point. Because then if you do want to slowly start reopening yourself up to these things, it's much easier to start partway there than to have to reopen everything again because you've pushed it so far, you can't even tap into it anymore. So it's a case of definitely do some research on the abilities, definitely talk to people or interact with people or just watch videos from people who have the same abilities that you do and see how they learn to control and manage it. Because although at the very start it can feel exceptionally overwhelming, having a long-term management plan is much better long-term than shutting everything out and trying really hard to box it away and lock it away, because this side can actually lead to further problems, whereas this is a much safer, much more manageable route that might seem a little difficult to do, but it's well worth it in the long run, because there are so many things that I could do a few years ago that I pushed away and now I really wish I hadn't. I really wish I hadn't. So that is a tip from me, is management, not rejection, is typically the best route I have found anyway for these kind of abilities. So those are 10 things that I wish I'd have known before I started properly diving into witchcraft. And some of these it has taken me a really, really long time to get out of. I'm talking like 10 plus years to get myself out of them. And if this video can stop one of you out there from doing the same mistakes I did, I really, really hope it does. Because boy, do I wish I'd have not made half of these mistakes. Like, damn. I spent way too many years taking what was written by a single author as gospel. I spent far too many years believing that Wicca and witchcraft had to be combined. I spent far too many years putting myself into a box and never practicing anything outside of it. And really, it's only been within the last 6 years that I have started to break out of that a little bit. And that is too long. I spent too long making these mistakes. So I'm really hoping that this video will help even just one of you out there from making the same mistakes I did. I would love to know what it is that you wish you'd learned before you started practicing witchcraft. What do you wish you'd have known? What would you have liked to have done differently? Please let me know down in the comment section, and I'm sure that it would help a lot of other people as well, because obviously these are just the mistakes I made. I'm sure there's lots of other mistakes out there that you've probably made. So sharing these mistakes will hopefully stop another person from making them, which is really the main goal of my YouTube channel, is just to stop people from making the same silly mistakes that I did, and maybe helping them to find a better alternative. So if you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. If you do have any mistakes, feel free to put them down in the comment section, or if you just want to chit chat, the comment section is there as well. We also have a Discord server, the link is in the description box. I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. You are so, so helpful to this channel. You mean so much to me, and your names will be on the end screen in just a moment. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try my best to post magical content every single week. So I hope you guys are all staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Making thumbnails hurts my face. I have to like scrunch my eyebrows up something crazy. Oh god, I still want to be able to move one eyebrow separately from the other. No, I can't do it. I don't understand how people do it. Nope. Pretty certain this is too high as well. Is that better? Is that better? I'm not sure. Is this better? Is this better? I don't know. And also my hands are so red because I've been washing them so much that I literally look a different colour. But I promise, my face does actually match my body. It just doesn't match my hands because my hands are kind of orange. Like, if I put this up, will it fix it? My camera keeps changing colour. I'm just going to have to hope that that's fine. Hey everyone, so it's Hearth. How does my hair look? I don't know. My hair always looks just weird on videos. I've noticed this. What is going on? Note to self, don't put the washing machine on before you start filming. Yeah. I'm just going to wait the spin cycle out. And hopefully it quietens down soon. Back to it before my camera overheats. Again, either my camera overheats or I do, or maybe a mix of the two perhaps. I am really looking forward to having my workshop / office back again. I've got so many ideas. Like, I have so many things I want to do, so many videos I want to do. I want to do spell videos. I want to do divination reading videos. I want to do just divination tool videos. That would be really, really cool. I want to do like Book of Shadows writing videos. I think they would be really cool. I want to make stuff, like make proper cool stuff that you might really appreciate, and I'm gonna really appreciate because I find it really cool and I'm so excited. My butt is completely numb. Like, it's completely numb. So I'm gonna go stand up, go for a walk. Oh, I didn't show you my sheet this time. I'm actually really proud of myself because I wrote this sheet out, I wrote this information out before my birthday. So this was like the end of June. It's now nearly the end of July. And I wrote this entire script out. And so that today, when I could film, when we had a day off from working on the office, I could just sit down and film. And this is amazing. I need to start doing this because usually what I do is I have this like amazing idea at 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I spend the next 3 hours writing a script. and then I get some sleep and I wake up and I alter the script some more, and then I do my makeup, sit down and I film, and I do it all in one day, which is really difficult on the really big videos. But now I'm starting to write my scripts in advance. Like, this is amazing. This is what organisation feels like, and that is not something I'm particularly well versed in. I also discovered, by the way, that I actually forgot several books from my Glastonbury haul because I'd already moved them. Why I didn't check other rooms in my house, I don't know, but I'd already read like a few of the books and I moved them around and I completely forgot to include them in the book haul. So I'm sorry about that. You might hear me talking about books that you've never heard of before, and it's because they were from Glastonbury and I forgot to talk about them because I am very disorganised. I'm just permanently in a state of chaos. This is what my life is. So I am going to go and pee, and then I'm going to get some more water because there's a fly in this one. Why? I really have to pee. Okay, I'm gonna go. Bye.